License and registration, please. The voice was low, steady, and just deep enough to send a shiver down Daniel's spine. He glanced up at the rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of the officer who had just tapped on his window. Broad shoulders, a sharp jawline, and a pair of green eyes that seemed to pierce straight through their glass. Daniel fumbled for his wallet, his hands shaking slightly as he handed over the requested documents. "Do y'all know why I pulled you over, Mr. Mitchell?" the officer asked, his tone firm but not unkind. Daniel swallowed. Heard. "Speeding 40 in a 25, the officer confirmed, raising an eyebrow. "In a hurry to get somewhere?" Danielle chuckled nervously. "Just heading home, long day?" The officer nodded, glancing down at the documents. "Photographer," he hissed, gesturing to the camera bag in the passenger seat. "Yeah," Daniel reapplied, his voice gaining a bit off confidence. "Freelance. I was shooting sunset." Over the Charles, the officer's eyes flicked up, meeting Daniel's for a moment. This must have been on his shot. "It was," Daniel said, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. The light was perfect. There was a pause, and for a moment, the tension in the car shifted. The officer handed back documents, his fingers brushing against Daniel's for just a second longer than necessary. "Slow it down, Mr. Mitchell. Boston's beautiful, but it's even better when you take the time to enjoy it." Daniel nodded, his heart racing for reasons that had nothing to do with the speeding ticket. "Got it. Thanks, officer," Connor the officer said, offering a small smile. "James, Connor, have a good night," as James walked back to his cruiser. Daniel let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He glanced at the camera bag, wondering if he'd just imagined the spark-off connection he'd felt. But the warmth in his chest told him otherwise. A week later, Daniel found himself at the harbor, his camera in hand as he waited for the perfect light. The sun was just beginning to dip below the horizon, casting the sky in hues of orange and pink. He adjusted his lens, trying to capture the way the light danced off the water. "Mind if I watch?" "What?" Daniel turned, startled, and there he was, Officer Connor. Out of uniform, wearing a simple black jacket that somehow made him look even more striking. Sure," Daniel said, his voice a little shaky. "What brings you here?" James shrugged, stepping closer. "I live nearby. Saw yo from the park and thought I'd say hi. How's the shooting going?" "It's good," Daniel said, glancing back at his camera. "I'm trying to capture their reflections on the water, but it's tricky." James stepped closer, peering at the viewfinder. "Mind if I take a look?" Daniel hesitated, then handed over the camera. Their fingers brushed again, and this time neither of them pulled away. James adjusted the settings, his hands moving with a confidence that made Daniel's breath catch. "Try this," James said, handing the camera back. "It'll help with the exposure. You need to let more light in." Daniel nodded, lifting the camera to his eye. Had adjusted the aperture, and suddenly the image was exactly what he'd been trying to capture. "Wow," he murmured. "That's perfect." James smiled, his green eyes meeting Daniel's. "Sometimes all you need is a little adjustment." Their paths began to cross more. Often after that, a coffee shop near the harbor became their unofficial meeting spot, where they'd talked for Arsa about photography, the city, and their lives. James seemed to have a natural eye for composition, and Daniel found himself drawn to the way he saw through. One rainy afternoon, they found themselves huddled under the awning of a bookstore, the rain pouring down around them. "You know," James said, his voice low and soft, "I've never met anyone who sees the world the way you do." Daniel looked up at him, his heart pounding. "I could say the same about you." There was a moment of silence, the rain creating a cocoon around them. James reached out, his hand brushing against Daniel's. "I've been thinking maybe we could, I don't now, see more of the world together." Daniel's breath hitched. "I'd like that," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But their budding romance wasn't without its challenges. James was careful about where they went and who they were seen with, always conscious of his role as Apella's officer. "It's not that I'm ashamed," James said one evening as they walked along the Charles. "It's just complicated. My partner, my family, they didn't know." Daniel nodded, understanding, but feeling the weight off secrecy. I get it, but I don't want to hide forever. James stopped, turning to face Daniel. I don't either, he said, his voice firm. Just need time. Daniel retched out, taking James' hand in his. We'll figure it out together. Attention Comito. Ahead one snowy evening. They were walking through Boston Common, their breath visible in the cold air, when James stopped and turned to Daniel. I can't keep doing this, he said, his voice trembling. I can't keep hiding how I feel about you. Daniel's heart raced. What are you saying? James took a deep breath, his green eyes locking Gonto. Daniel's. I'm saying I want to be with you openly. No more secrets. Daniel felt a wave of emotion crash over him. Are you sure? James nodded, his resolve wavering. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The sound of footsteps crunching through the snow broke the moment. It turned to see James's partner approaching, a look of suspicion on his face. James, the man said, his tone sharp. What's going on here? James straightened, his hands still clutching Daniel's. This is Daniel Hest, his voice steady. He's the man I'm in love with. The partner's eyes widened, and for a moment there was but silence. Finally, he nodded. I guess we've got some things to talk about. As the snow continued to fall, Daniel looked up at James, his heart full, ready to face the world together. He asked. James squeezed, hishant, a small smile playing on his lips. Ready? And as they walked away, hand in hand, Daniel couldn't help but feel that this was just the beginning of something beautiful. The city around them was alive with possibility, and for their first time in a long time, Daniel felt like he was exactly where he was, Mintobi. The weeks following James' public declaration were a whirlwind of emotions, both electric and daunting. The snow had melted, leaving Boston in a state of crisp early spring. Daniel's photography, once a solitary passion, now felt like a shared journey. James should become his muse, his partner, honest confidant. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low over the harbor, Daniel adjusted his camera lens, capturing the way the golden light danced on the water. James stood beside him, his arms crossed, a quiet smile on his face. You'll make the city look like a dream, James murmured, his voice low and warm. Daniel glanced up, his cheeks flushing. It's easy when I've got the perfect subject. He snapped another, shot the shutter, clicking softly. You know, you were surprisingly good at this for a cop. James laughed, a deep rumbling sound that made Daniel's chest tighten. I've had a good teacher. He stepped closer, his hand brushing against Daniel's as Hep pointed to the horizon. What about that? The way the light hits the bridge, it's breathtaking. Daniel's breath hitched. Not because of the view, but because off. Way James's voice softened when Hess spoke, as if he were sharing something Zachared. Yeah, he whispered. Breathtaking. Their moments together were like this, quiet, intimate, filled with unspoken words that hung in the air between them. But for every tenderment, there was a shadow lurking. The tension at the precinct had ground palpable. James' partner, Officer Mark Harris, had been watching him more closely, sharp eyes narrowing every time James returned from a call, Histon clipped and probing. One evening, as James sat at his desk filling out paperwork, Mark leaned against Theaterway, his arms crossed. You've been distracted lately, Mark said, his voice listening through the quiet of the room. James didn't look up, his pen still moving across the page. Just busy, you know how it is. Mark stepped inside, closing the door behind him. The sound was final, like a lock clicking in her place. Busy, huh? Or is it something old? James' pen stilled. He glanced up, meeting Mark's gaze. What are you jetting? At Mark's lips tightened into Athen line. I've seen you, Connor. You're a different. Smiling at your phone. To King Long lunches. Hell, you've even been late to roll call. It's not like you. James leaned back in his chair. Heist's expression neutral. Maybe I'm just straying to have a life outside of this place. Mark's eyes narrowed. And is that life compromising your job? Because if it is, I need to know. James' jaw tightened, but he kept his tone even. My personal life is just that, personal. It's not affecting my work. Mark stepped closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. You're not just anyone, Connor. You're a cop. And if you're hiding something that could jeopardize this department, I can't let that slide. The room felt suffocating, the air heavy with unspoken threats. James stood, his chair scraping against the floor. I'm not hiding anything, Hesed, his voice steady, though his hands clenched into fists at his sides. If you have a problem with how I'm doing me job, take it up with the captain. Mark studied him for a long moment, Heist's expression unreadable. Then, with a curt nod, he turned and left, Theodore clicking shut behind him. James sank back into his chair, his heart pounding. He knew this wasn't over. Marquez is too sharp, too persistent. Later that night, James found himself at Daniel's apartment, the weight of Thuday pressing on his shoulders. Danielle up on the door, his smile fading when saw James' expression. Hey, he said softly, stepping aside to let him in. What? What's wrong? James exhaled heavily, running a hand through his hair. Mark's into me. It's bad, Daniel. He's digging. And if he finds out Hess stopped, his voice cracking. Daniel's chest tightened. He reached out, his hand resting on James's arm. Hey, we'll figure this out, okay? You're not alone in this. James looked at him, his green eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. I can't lose this job, Daniel, but I can't lose you either. Daniel stepped closer, his voice quiet but firm. You won't. We'll face this together, just like we've faced everything else. James' breath shuddered us. He pulled Daniel into a tight embrace, his face buried in the crook of his neck. I don't know what to do. Daniel held him, his hand moving in slow circles on his back. We'll figure it out, he whispered, one step at a time. They stood like that for what felt like hours, the world outside fading away. But the weight of their reality lingered, a storm on the horizon. And as James pulled back high-size searching Daniel's, he knew that then X steps they took would define everything. I need to tell the captain, James said, his voice barely above a whisper. Before Mark does, I need to comb clean. Daniel's heart raced, but Hannah did. Then we'll do it together. Whatever happens, James, we're in this together. James squeezed his hand, his grip firm as if anchoring himself tooth moment. Together, he repeated, through it heavy with meaning. The next morning, the precinct felt colder than usual, the lights harsher. James and Daniel walked in side by side, their hands brushing but not holding. Their stares from the other officers were palpable, whispers following them like shadows. As they reached the captain's office, James paused, his hand hovering over the door. He looked at Daniel, his green eyes filled with a mix of fear and resolve. Ready? He asked, his voice steady. Daniel nodded, his heart pounding, but his voice unwavering. Ready? James knocked, the sound echoing in the hallway. The captain's voice called from within, and James pushed the door open, stepping inside. Daniel followed, his pulse racing as Theodore clicked shut behind them. The captain looked up, his expression unreal. Officer Connor, Mr. Mitchell, what can I do for you? James took a deep breath, his shoulders squaring. Captain, there's something I need to tell you. The captain leaned back in his chair, folding his hands over the desk. His gaze flicked between James and Daniel, steady and calculating. All right, Officer Connor, let's hear it. James swallowed hard, his throat suddenly dry. He glanced at Daniel, whose presence beside him felt like an anchor, grounding him. Sir, I wanted to be upfront with you about my personal life. Daniel and I were in a relationship. The room seemed to hold its breath. The captain's expression did change, but his eyes narrowed slightly as if processing the information. Daniel felt his stomach twist, but kept his face composed, his fingers brushing lightly against Jameson, a silent show of solidarity. I see, the captain said finally, his tone measured. And how long has this been going on? A few months, James admitted. His voice steady despite the tension coiled in his chest. I didn't think it was relevant to my work, but I wanted to be honest with you. I don't want there to be any misunderstanding or issues within the precinct. The captain leaned forward, his elbows resting on the desk. Officer Connor Yachno, the department has policies. Relationships, especially those that could be seen as conflicts of interest, can complicate things. I understand that, sir, James said quickly. But Daniel isn't involved in any of my cases. He's a photographer. This is personal, not professional. Daniel cleared his throat, stepping forward slightly. Captain, if I may, James Hazelway's been incredibly dedicated to his work. Our relationship hasn't interfered with that. If anything, he's been more focused, more driven. The captain studied them for a moment longer, his expression unreadable. Then he sighed, leaning back again. I appreciate your highnessy, Officer Connor, but this won't stay between us. You know how the rumor mill works around here? Are you prepared for that? James nodded, his jaw tightening. I am. I've spent too long hiding who I am. I'm ready to face whatever comes. The captain gave a curt nod. All right, just be mindful of appearances. And Connor, don't let this distract you from your duties. It won't, sir, James said firmly. The captain glanced at Daniel. And you, Mr. Mitchell, I hope you understand the position this puts James in. I do, Daniel said, his voice steady. I'd never do anything to jeopardize his career. The captain nodded again, standing to signal. The end of the conversation. Good, that's all for now. Keep me informed if anything changes. James and Daniel exchanged a look before turning to leave. The hallway outside felt cooler, the air easier to breathe. Daniel exhaled, his shoulders relaxing slightly. That could have gone worse. James chuckled, though it was tinged with relief. Yeah, but it's not over yet. As they walked toward the exit, they passed Officer Mark Harris in the hallway. His sharp eyes locked on them, and he paused, his thin lips curling into a tight smile. Officer Connor, Mr. Mitchell, didn't expect to see you here. James stiffened, but kept his tone neutral. Just had a meeting with the captain. Mark's gaze lingered in, Daniel's suspicion glinting in high eyes. Must have been important. It was, James said simply, his voice firm, hadn't elaborate, and after a moment, Mark nodded and continued down Thaleway. Once they were outside, Daniel glanced at James. He knows. He suspects James corrected, his jaw tightening. But they'll find out sooner or later. Might as well be on my terms. Daniel reached for Jim's hand, their fingers intertwining. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. James squeezed his hand, Asmel's smile tugging at his lips. Together, the next few days were tense. James could feel Mark's eyes on him at the precinct, and the whispers among his colleagues grew louder. But he held his head high, focusing on his work and letting his actions speak for themselves. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the harbor, Daniel set up his camera on the pier. The golden light bathed the water, creating a stunning backdrop for his shots. James leaned against the railing beside him, his uniform traded for jeans and ass-weeder. You're getting better at this, James said, watching as Daniel adjusted the settings on his camera. Daniel grinned.
Oh.
I've had a good teacher. James laughed softly, his breath visible in the cool evening air. You're the one with the natural talent. I just point things out. Daniel snappied a few shots, then lowered the camera, turning to face James. You know, you've been thinking about the future. James raised an eyebrow, his curious sipped. Yeah, Daniel said, his expression thoughtful. I've been feeling inspired lately. Maybe it's the foul colors, or I don't know. But I want to put together a gallery, a collection of me, best work. James' eyes lit up. That's a great idea. You've got a unique perspective. People should see that, Daniel smiled, warmth spreading through us. Chess. I was hoping you'd say that. I'd like you to be there. It's not just at the gallery, but in the photos too, if you're comfortable with that. James hesitated, his gaze dropping to the water. Daniel, I'm not sure if that's a good idea. My job. It's complicated. No, Daniel said softly, stepping closer. But this is our story. Your story. I want to show the world who you really are. James looked at him, his green eyes searching Daniel's face. And if it backfires, if it makes things shorter for me at work, then we'll handle it, Daniel said firmly. But you deserve to be seen, James. Not just as an officer, but as a man who's bravened, kind, and loved. James breathed, and for a moment he didn't respond. Then he reached out, his hand cupping Daniel's cheek. "You really believe in me, don't you?" "Always," Daniel whispered. James leaned in, their foreheads touching. "All right," he said quietly. "Let's do it. Let's show them what we are." Daniel's heart swelled and leaned in, their lips meeting in auguses that spoke of promises and possibilities. The harbor around them seemed to fade, leaving only the two off them and the warmth of their connection as they pulled away. James smiled, a spark of determination in his eyes. "But first, let's get that perfect shot." Daniel laughed, raising his camera. "Lead the way." They spent the next hour capturing the beauty of the harbor, the golden light of sunset giving way to the soft hues of twilight. James posed naturally, his confidence growing with a click of the shutter. As the last light faded, Daniel lowered. The cameraman smiled. "That," he said, "is going to be the centerpiece of the gallery." James stepped closer, his arm wrapping around Daniel's shoulders. "I can't wait." Astley packed up and headed back to Decker. Daniel's mind raced with ideas' fourth gallery. But more than that, he felt a sense of hope. They were building something together, something real, something brave. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Suspicions, the whisper, sat the precinct, the weight of societal expectations. They were all still there. But as Daniel glanced at James, his heart swelled with love and determination. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. Later that night, as they lay in bed, Daniel turned to James. "Have you thought about your family? What happens if they find out?" James hesitated, his gaze fixed on the ceiling. "I've thought about it a lot, my parents. They're not exactly open-minded, but I can't keep living for them. I have to live for me, for us." Daniel reached for his hand, squeezing it. "Gently, you're not alone in this. Whatever happens, I'll be right here with you." James turned to him, his green eyes soft in the dim light. "Thank you," he whispered, "for believing in me, for loving me." Daniel smiled, his heart full of ways. As they drifted off to sleep, the weight of the world outside seemed to fade. In that moment, there was only two of them, their love, a beacon in darkness. The next morning, James woke to the sound of his phone buzzing. On the nightstand. He groaned, reaching for it, and saw Mark's name on the screen. He hesitated, then answered. "Harris," he said, his voice still heavy with sleep. Mark's sharp tone cut through the line. "We need to talk now." James sat up, his heart quickening. "What's this about?" "Thek Aptain's office. Be there in 20. Mark hung up without waiting for a response. James stared at the phone, his stomach twisting. He turned to Daniel, who was awake now, concern etched on his face. "What's wrong?" Daniel asked. James exhaled slowly. "I'm not sure, but I think it's about us." James' fingers tightened around the phone as he met Daniel's gaze. The room felt suddenly smaller, the air heavier. "What do y'all think he wants?" Daniel asked, his voice steady, but laced with worry. He sat up, the sheets pooling around his waist, his bare chest catching the faint morning light streaming through the blinds. "I didn't know," James admitted, running a hand through his hair. "But I can't shake the feeling it's not good." Daniel reached out, his hand warm against James' arm. "Whatever it is, we'll handle it together. You're not alone in this." James nodded, but the knot in his stomach didn't loosen. He stood pulling in his uniform with practiced efficiency. Daniel watched him, his eyes soft but unyielding. "You sure you don't want me to come with you?" "Better not," James said, buttoning his shirt. "If this is about us, I need to face it, Head Allen." Daniel's lips pressed into a thin line, but he didn't argue. Instead, Hess stood, pulling James into a firm embrace. "Just remember," he murmured into James' ear, "you're not just an officer. You're you, and I love you for who you are, not what you do." James swallowed hard, his arms tightening around Daniel. "I love you too," he whispered. The walk to the precinct felt longer than usual. Every step seemed to echo in his ears, his mind racing with possibilities. When he entered the captain's office, Mark was already there, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. The captain sat behind the desk, their face calm, but inscrutable. "Connor," the captain said, gesturing to a chair. "Have a seat." James sat, his posture rigid, his hands clasped in his lap. Mark leaned against wall, his sharp eyes fixed on James. The silence stretched thick and heavy until the captain finally spoke. "We've had some concerns raised," they said, their tone measured. "About your recent behavior." James's jaw tightened. "What kind of concerns?" Mark stepped forward, his voice cutting through the room. "Thinking that makes people wonder if you're personal. Life is interfering with your job. You've been distracted, Connor. You're not as focused as you used to be." James' fingers dug into his knees. "My personal life has never affected my work." "Really?" Mark's eyes narrowed. "Then explain why you've been spending so much time with that photographer, the one you pelled over months ago." James' chest tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "Daniel Mitchell. He's a friend. We share an interest in photography." "That's all," Mark snorted, a sound that was equal parts disbelief and disdain. "A friend. Come on, Connor. Don't insult our intelligence." The captain held up a hand, silencing Mark. "James, we're nother to judge. But if there's something going on, something that could affect your role here, we need to know." James' heart pounded in his chest. He glanced at Mark, then at the captain. For a moment, he considered lying, brushing it off as nothing. But then he thought of Daniel, his kindness, his unwavering spurt. He thought of the way they'd faced everything together, even when it was hard. "There's something," James said quietly. He took a deep breath, his hands trembling in his lap. "Daniel, Andy, we're more than friends." Mark's lips curled into a smirk, but the captain's expression didn't change. They nodded, their gaze steady. "Thank you for being honest, James. This isn't easy, but it's important." Mark stepped forward again, his voice harsher now. "You realize Watha's means, right? You're putting the entire force at risk? What if this Caduce decides to use your relationship against you? What if he leaks something sensitive?" James' eyes snapped to Mark. "Daniel would never do that. He's not like that. He's not some liability, isn't he?" Mark's voice was cold. "You were letting your personal feelings cloud your judgment. That's dangerous, Connor. For you, for the Force." For everyone, the captain stood, their presence seconded in immediate silence. "Enough," they said firmly. "James, I appreciate your honesty, but you need to consider implications of this. Being in a relationship, especially one that is widely accepted, comes with challenges. You need to be prepared for that." James nodded, his throat tight. "I understand, Captain, but I'm not going to hide this. I'm not going to deny who I am or who I love." The captain studied him for a long moment, their expression unreadable. Then they nodded. "Very well, but tread carefully, James. The road ahead won't be easy." Mark scoffed, shaking his head as he turned to leave. "You're making a mistake, Connor. Don't say I didn't warn you." When the door closed behind Mark, the room felt quieter, but the tension lingered. The captain sighed, their tone softer now. "James, I mean it. Be careful. Not everyone will be as understanding as I am." James stood, his legs unsteady. "Thank you, Captain Fournette, making me regret being honest." Thika Payne nodded, their gaze almost dieting. "Just don't let this define you. You're a good officer. Don't lose sight of that." James left the office, his mind whirling with emotions. He felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief that he'd been honest. Dread about what is meant for his future. When Hess stepped outside, the crisp autumn air hit him sharp and bracing. He pulled out his phone, his fingers hovering over Daniel's name. He wanted to call him, to hear his voice, to feel that reassurance if only Daniel could give. But before he could dial, a voice called out from behind him. "Connor." James turned to see Mark standing there, his expression hurt. "You think you're so brave, don't you?" Mark said, his voice low. "But let me tell you something. This isn't bravery. It's recklessness. And it's going to come back to bite you." James all clenched. "I'm not going to apologize for who I am." Lips twisted into a bitter smile. "Maybe not. but you'll regret it. You'll see. James watched as Mark walked away, his back stiff, his footsteps echoing on the pavement. He felt a surge of anger, but also something else, something like a determination. He wasn't going to let Mark or anyone else dictate his life. He dialed Daniel's number, his heart pounding as the phone rang. When Daniel's voice came through, warm and steady, James felt a wave of relief. "Hey," Daniel said. "How did it go?" James took a deep breath, the tension in his chest easing just a little. "It was complicated, but I told them about us." There was a pause on the other end off the line, and then Daniel's voice, soft but firm. "I'm proud of you, James. You didn't have to do that, but you did." James leaned against the wall, his shoulders sagging. I don't know what happens now. Mark's already making it clear he's not on my side." Daniel's voice was calm, reassuring. "Then we'll handle it together. Whatever comes next, we'll face it like we always do." James closed his eyes, letting Daniel's words sink in. "I love you," he said quietly. "I love you too," Daniel replied. "Now come home. We'll figure this out."